All right. So one of the, I think, really positive trends that I've seen in terms of physical training, physical activity, fitness in the last few years is a lot more people have been embracing sandbags. When I say sandbags, I don't mean the ones that you see at maybe at boot camps that have lots of different handles, but I mean the strongman style sandbags, which are usually these sort of plain sort of cylinders or balls that are filled with sand. They tend to be quite heavy. So people working at weights that are roughly their own body weight. So as opposed to a lot of the boot camp ones, which sometimes just might be 20, 30 pounds, we're talking about lifting ones that, are maybe like 150 pounds, 140 pounds, quite heavy. Um, and the sandbags have been getting a lot of interest recently for the same reasons that people have always used them, which is that they're odd objects. You have to do lots of adjustments. They have really good transferability to real life. Sometimes people will call this like moving day strength. And what I mean is you could spend your entire life in a gym doing deadlifts and squats. But then if you go out and help your friends move some furniture, you might find that actually that kind of strength doesn't transfer as much as you would like because you're in all these different positions. You don't have the perfect foot position. And actually, you end up in these positions and angles that don't often look like a classic deadlift or a squat. Whereas when you're doing sandbag training, because you have all these micro adjustments, because it's never the same lift twice, and because actually the lift takes much, much longer, you can't just bang out reps and reps and reps of this perfect deadlift form because every single time you pick up the sandbag and put it down, it turns into a slightly different object. It's never going to have the same level of pack. Even things like level of humidity and how much moisture is in the bag is going to affect that, which means that you have this great amount of variability where you're picking it up. And a lot of the benefits come from, adjusting it, trying to pick it up. How are you going to lap it? How are you going to get it up to here? How do you adjust it? Where do your hands go? And then you pick it up to here and often you're going to have different grips every single time. You're going to have this tremendous amount of time under tension where all the muscles, your lower back muscles, your interior core muscles, and a lot of your shoulder muscles, your biceps and everything are adjusting. So you're constantly under tension. And one rep of picking up the sandbag, getting it to your lap, standing up, maybe putting it onto a high shelf or something like that, loading it onto a platform, that could take 3 or 4 seconds, which doesn't sound like a long time, but would be the equivalent of doing multiple deadlifts. Um, and as with all these sorts of things, the implement that you're using is going to have a huge effect on form. Form emerges from the objects that you're picking up. So what most people think of as being good form with a deadlift, with a barbell, okay, that is going to be constrained by the design of the barbell. So what I mean is your standard barbell is about 2.2 meters long. It's going to be 28 millimeters in diameter. And then it's usually going to be about 9 inches off the ground or so if you're using Olympic plates, which means that everyone is going to get used to picking up this. Because the barbell is so long, it's always going to be in front of your shins. It's always going to be out here. It's always going to be uniform. You're also going to be in a different position because it's designed to be picked up. Your limiting factor most of the time when you're picking things up is actually not going to be the weight. It's going to be getting your body around it. So I can easily pick up something that weighs like 100 kilos, 200, 300 pounds, no problem with the barbell, because all I have to do is get my hands around it and stand up. And that is a entirely different lift than if you're working with a sandbag. If you're working with a sandbag, it's often going to be much lower. You're going to have to spend some time getting comfortable down here, moving the sandbag around. You're going to find your tension in a different position. Also, the gravity, the center of mass is not going to be out in front of you like it would be with a barbell. With the barbell, people will always kind of focus on having this sort of perfectly flat back, not hyperextending, not going into flexion, but just finding your neutral, pulling your tension in here, and then somehow standing up and bringing your hips to the bar. Okay, there's very few variables in that, and people can train that. And they can get every single little point perfect as if they were training for a competition, which most people are not. A lot of the tips and tricks that work in a powerlifting competition are not really going to carry over to real life. When you're using a sandbag, it's actually, you're going to find, you look at any sandbag video of strongmen or any sort of strength athletes or anyone who trains with a sandbag, and they're not going to be worried about having this perfectly straight spine. That's really a holdover from other sports that people focus on. With the sandbag, you're almost naturally always going to go into a certain amount of rounding right here. And that's okay, because also the sandbag is going to be closer to you. And the way you're moving it, you're going to be really conscientious of keeping it close to you. So when you pick it up, and let's say you lap it here at the same time, you're not going to be completely rigid here. That's not what we're going for. You're actually going to bend over, you're going to hug the sandbag, you're going to get over, and as you stand up, okay, you're going to have a lot of flexion there. But that's okay. If you look at most of the modern thinking on this, there's nothing wrong with spinal flexion when loaded. It's all about ensuring that you have graded adaptation, that you slowly and gradually increase your body's exposure to different positions while you're lifting. It's going to be okay. In terms of our muscles' ability to adapt, if you don't do something too fast, too quickly, if you give your body time to get used to stress in different positions, that means you're going to be strong in those different positions. I find a lot of the limitations come when people try to lift the exact same way every single time. And that means they have this very narrow, very fragile kind of strength that they can only express in a very limited set of dimensions. Whereas when you do sandbag training, because you naturally have all this variability, you're going to have this really sort of rich, deep strength that you can apply in all these different kinds of situations because you're not trying to get the perfect lift every time. What you're trying to do is you're trying to expose yourself to as much micro variations as possible so that you have this great general transferable strength that you can apply to the real world. Okay, I just want to talk about the difference between picking up a barbell and picking up a sandbag, and just showing how the implement can affect the technique and how we don't want to confuse a set of rules that make sense necessarily in a gym with universal rules that are true for everything. So if I were going to pick up a barbell, if I was going to teach someone to pick up a barbell, first I'd have them check their stance. I'd say, okay, well, you want your feet probably about hip width apart, so something like that. And then you want to check your distance. I might say, well, bend your knees. And if you bend your knees, you should just about be able to touch the barbell with your shins. And then from there, I'd say, think about your grip. So for me, I know that if I find the knurling, I'm a thumb distance here, a thumb distance here. I'm gonna get myself tight. I'm gonna pull myself down until I find tension in my body in the barbell. And already you can see the barbell starting to lift a little bit. Now from there, okay, I'm gonna start with my chest and hips raising at the same time until I open up my hips and I come to this position right here, standing tall, not hyperextending at the top. On the way back down, I'm gonna push my bum back. I'm gonna come like that. If I do it a little bit faster, it looks like that. 1, 2, 3. So that's how I would teach someone to do a deadlift in a gym setting. And there's a lot of reasons for that. In a gym, you have to think about health and safety. You know, you have very specific credentials that might teach you to teach a barbell lift in a certain way. You know that you're going to have certain uniform factors, like if you're using Olympic plates or bumper plates, you know that they're going to be a certain height. You know there's going to be a standard barbell. There's all these things that mean that you can kind of generalize how you're supposed to lift a barbell. Now, if we come over here and we're doing a sandbag, the rules are a little bit different because number one, because it's not a bar, I can start off with it much closer to me. With a barbell, I naturally can't get too close because the barbell is going to get in the way of my shins. So already my back is going to be a much, much longer lever. If you look at the distance between the weight and where I carry my back over here, whereas with the sandbag, I can get right over the sandbag, and usually I will get over the sandbag. So already, instead of me trying to lift back here like this, I've already changed the way that I'm working here. The other thing is, naturally now, because I'm stepping over the sandbag like that, my stance is gonna be much wider, which is gonna change my angles when I'm trying to get down to the ground. So that's different as well. My grip isn't gonna be universal because the sandbag is never the same twice. So I need to spend some time down here sort of finding a grip that feels good. All right, so now I'm really close to it. It's right underneath me. I'm gonna go ahead and get myself tight. This is where I feel strong. And then I'm gonna stand. And maybe if I wanna lap it, I'm gonna come down here. And now all of a sudden, you see I've got a lot of flexion in my lumbar spine. I'm rounding my back, which people will tell you is a bad thing if you're doing a barbell deadlift. But actually with a sandbag, I'm pulling my whole body so close to it that I don't need to worry about this long lever. And my main thing is I actually really wanna hug close to sandbag and keep it as close as I can. But if I pick it up a different way, now if I'm standing from a different angle, the sandbag settled a little bit. Maybe I'm going to find a position that feels a little different. That lift was really different because I'm not trying to make all my lifts look the same. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to adjust my body to what the sandbags give me at this particular time. I'm not always even going to lift it the entire way. If I lift a sandbag this way, all of a sudden it's entirely different than if I lift it this way or I lift it this way. So I can't pretend that there's one universal perfect form. I'm not trying to make every single lift look the same. I'm accepting the variability and then I'm adapting my body to what the sandbag is giving me at the time. So these are really two entirely different tasks, and you see entirely different forms emerge, both of which are safe. But again, you have to think about the why before you decide whether something is wrong or right. So we're gonna have Jill come over here and lift up the sandbag. I'm not gonna tell her what to do. I'm not gonna give her any prescriptive form here. All I'm gonna ask her to do is I'm just gonna ask her to get some familiar with the sandbag and pull herself into the position where she feels strongest. So whatever feels strong for her is the position I want her to be in. So you can see she's shifting her hips up and down. She's finding the tension, and her hips are quite high, but that's where she's found tension when she's picking this up. This feels strong for her. So she's picked up pretty handily, and she's going for a lap, and she can just go ahead and stand. This is a chunk of weight. This is probably about 150 pounds right here. All right. So if I were going to do that, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to try to pick this up, and I'm going to find a spot where I feel strongest. And if you look at the difference in our limb length, so if I go ahead and I find my hip crease, so Jill, where's your hip crease? So that's Jill's hip crease right here. This is my hip crease. So we're about the same height, and you can see her legs are that much longer, okay? But then if we're gonna both sit on the ground, here, let's just sit on the ground really quick, all right? So now we're sitting on the ground, all right? And we can see that actually my torso is much longer. You can see where her shoulder is versus where my shoulder is. So we've got almost the opposite build. And actually, if we sit, look at my teeny tiny little legs here. You know, there's absolutely no way that we're going to have the same lifting technique, and it's absolutely silly to impose that on us. So for me, when I go ahead and I lift something, I'm going to find where I feel strong, and that's going to be relative to, you know, the length of my legs, the length of my femur, the length of my tibia, the length of my torso. And for me, when I go back and forth and I pull myself in a strong position, this is what my strong position feels like. So when I come up here, my lift is going to look completely different from her lift. Now, if someone came over and they said, no, you need to make sure that your lifts look the same, you're imposing like a whole bunch of weird expectations on someone, not taking into account that they've got entirely different body types. I think the other point that we need to consider here is there's a certain amount of availability bias and survivorship bias in the different body types that we see doing different activities. So what I mean is if you're playing high-level basketball, in general, basketball is going to select for a certain body type. So you know, maybe certain limb length, maybe certain arm span, certain height. So I don't know, the average height of a basketball player in the NBA is probably like 6'7" or something now. It's a really specific body type. Same thing if you see swimmers standing at the podium of the Olympics, you're going to see the swimmers generally have the same body type in terms of ratio of torso to legs, arm span, size of hands, things like that. The reason this is important is because when we see high-level power lifters competing, or if we see high-level strongman competitors, that's also going to select for a certain kind of body type at a certain level of competition. And they're not going to look like Jill. You don't see people who are built like Jill doing strength sports. So when you do have someone who's really limby and they do a strength sport, people's brains explode because it's like, well, that doesn't look like what it normally looks like. So famously, when you see NBA players do back squats, okay, they might be doing something like this, and the whole internet starts making fun of them because that's how their back squat's going to look. But they don't care about depth. They're not trying to become Olympic weightlifters. They're just trying to move the weight, and that's what their levers allow them to do.
Try and lift that as the way that I meant to lift it.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, I think I don't even know if saying the way you meant.
The way that the internet would like.
Yeah, you can try it with a low hip, and this will also, you know, levers are going to play a big role here because her relative quad strength, you know, that's really going to depend a lot on her femur length. Yeah, so Jill's really trying to pull herself down right now. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get it so that her bum is below her shoulder. So she really needs to get her bum as low as she can, low bum.
Can't get the tension.
It's just not going to happen. For her to get low enough, she's just not going to find the tension to get into that position. And also, if you look, I think another thing to look at, go ahead and do that one more time. Let's look at hip to knee this time, all right? So Jill's trying to do that, okay? And as she's trying to pull herself down into that position, you know, you just look at this right here. So get in your strong position. All right. So that's her strong position right there, which I think would freak a lot of people out. But that's where her levers are going to be. But even for me, when I get down here, you know, for me, when I squat, I don't really get to parallel very easily. If I've got a little bit of weight, I can. But even though I'm down here, okay, and you look at where my hips and shoulders are, if you actually look at my hip crease relative to my knee, all right, I'm actually not that low. If you look at it, even though it looks like I'm down low, my hip crease is still well above my knee, even though my hip and my shoulder ratio is like this. All right. So this is how I would pick up, and it looks like I'm squatting down really low. Jill, go ahead and just do it one more time. Try to get as low as possible. So you see Jill right here. She's trying to get yourself as low as possible. So she's getting herself as low as possible here. All right. And just look for her to get her hips to there. Look what a different relationship her torso's in. So even if you ask her to get in that position, it doesn't even make any sense. Yeah. So in order for her to find the tension in her straight arms, you need to look at that. So, you know, it just goes to show you can't take a snapshot of somebody and saying they're doing this wrong or right, because it's much more complicated than that. And honestly, most of us we don't have degrees in biomechanics. And even then, people are going to self-organize in a technique and a form that works for them. And it just doesn't seem fair to impose abstract ideas on people if it doesn't work for them in real life.